All right. The Mummy. That's my number three. What's your
Nice.
number three?
My number three is a film from 1947, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. So this is directed by Norman Z. McLeod, starring Danny Kaye, Virginia Mayo, and Boris Karloff. So the IMDb plot summary is a clumsy daydreamer gets caught up in a sinister conspiracy. This is a film that I watched a lot as a kid, and it definitely really
Oh,
impacted me in terms of sense of adventure. Had you seen this before or heard of this film before?
I had not. I'd heard of it because Ben Stiller made a remake,
Yes,
which
there
was
was a
much
remake.
maligned, which I did not watch.
Yeah, I
So I
haven't
knew it
seen it.
was a remake, but
Okay.
I had not watched the movie. But look at us going back to our childhoods for our number threes.
I know. Yeah, no, totally. And the Danny Kaye was also an actor from this time period that I watched a lot of his movies as a kid too. Had you seen him before or know about him? Because a lot of this.
I knew about him. I think I've seen a movie or two of him, but
Okay.
don't have any association like you probably did.
Yeah.
If I've seen something, it was much later in life.
Got it. Okay, yeah, because this movie is really much a showcase for him and his comedic sensibilities and his
Totally.
talents. But to
It
get
comes
into,
across.
yeah, to get into like why this film did resonate with me. The movie, as it said in the plot summary, it is about, he plays this daydreamer who's always going off on these adventures in his head because his own life is so mundane and boring, and he's a very put upon guy. Like even the opening scene, he's there driving his mom to the store or something in a car, and she's yelling at me like, "Oh, you're driving too fast, like stop this." So you immediately know this is a guy who's like very put upon, doesn't have a lot of agency in his life, but he does in his dreams, and everything can inspire him to go off, and they have these really cool little like dream sequences. And to me, like as someone who was not a like Brendan Fraser going off on these quests to try to find ancient relics in the desert, that's adventure for him. Like for me as a kid, like I can only just daydream and think about the adventures I wanted to be on, much like Walter Mitty was doing in this film. And I always loved those fantasy sequences too. As a kid who did think a lot about things. I mean, as kids do, I guess they do a lot of daydreaming.
Oh yeah.
But I was definitely inspired, and he would see like the first one is he sees a billboard with for some soap or something. There's like ship on it, and then he imagines himself as a captain in this giant storm. But he's always the hero in all of his adventures too,
Right.
which I thought is kind of fun. But then the twist, I guess, in this is he does fall into a real adventure, some
Mm-hmm.
cloak and dagger kind of conspiracy with like a murder.
Hitchcockian
Yeah, exactly.
stories.
Very kind of Hitchcockian plot sort of comes in, and he is not like he's afraid, he's scared of it. He all of a sudden, like when his real sense of adventure is put to the test initially, like it's not like he jumps at the bit. It's like finally I can do this in real life. He starts freaking out and doesn't want to be involved and is scared of this and scared of this. And I think over time, actually, though, he does end up being getting that real life sense of adventure. So for me, it was not only something I connected to a lot as a kid because of the daydreaming aspect, and I could only kind of picture myself in these scenarios, but I think it's got a good lesson too of, you might think adventure's fun, and when you're on it, it's very
Mm-hmm.
different, but still you should power through it because you'll never
Mm-hmm.
know kind of where that'll lead your life. And in this movie, he does have a happy ending. He's now has agency. He's with a woman he's in love with instead of someone who's kind of being forced upon him. So I think it has good messages that I was related to a lot in terms of what adventure could be for me as a kid when I would watch this movie. Did you kind of get that sense too when you were seeing? Were you
Oh
a
yeah.
daydreamer yourself, or maybe I
Still
don't know if all
am.
kids do. You still are. Okay, well, maybe that I've left that behind me. So I'm happy to hear that you're still doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? Those sequences and
To
stuff.
a degree, not the way I was as a kid, but to a degree, I would say. I think a little bit of daydreaming is a good thing in my books.
Hmm.
But yeah, those same themes definitely came across, and I love the storyline. I think the messages and the story of the movie is fantastic, and he's very good. I would say though, not to kind of critique the movie, and I'm curious to hear your opinion, that
Yeah.
at some point the gags of, oh yeah, he's showing up to office with weird contraptions that his mom asked him to return and what have you, they get a
Yeah.
little bit old
Yeah.
after a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
And I knew this, even if I didn't know this, it's very obvious from the movie that it's a showcase on his comedic
Yes.
talent. So you sort of get into some pretty elaborately staged things, which the first time around, his sort of 1 hour, it's not an hour, but like 15-minute comedy show special is actually pretty good. But then
Yeah. Yeah.
when it happens a couple of times, like, oh, I was like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me you're doing this all over again now. So there's a little bit of that
Yeah.
sort of was happening, but otherwise, like, he's great. Like, if this movie was maybe even done then at that
Hmm.
time, but with a more capable director who was not totally given into Danny Kaye's, off-screen persona, this movie would actually be in one of the greats, I think, because the story is so incredible. I mean, why couldn't this be It's the Wonderful Life or any of those kind of movies? It could be if handled that way. That's the thing that I kept thinking. That said, I had a ball. I love movies from that time anyway, so it was a good time watching the movie.
Yeah, I understand your criticism or critique, I guess, of that aspect. There is a lot of kind of vaudevillian parts of the film, which is not something that I typically like, that style. And you can kind of tell it's like, okay, you go off and do your thing for a little bit, Danny Kaye, which happens a lot with like stand-up comedians too when they're in comedies. You sort of can tell, oh, they're just doing their stand-up bit for this scene instead of something organic in the film. But it's funny, like when I rewatch it, because I hadn't seen this movie actually since I was a kid, and I watched it a lot as a kid, and it stayed with me, so that's why I had to include it in this episode. But I found myself like remembering most those bits, like the Danny, especially that whole bit he had about the orchestra. I love that scene.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I remember like every line of this. And I thought that was so funny. And those are things I loved as a kid, like rewatching those particular points. And the more messages of the movie to me were more subtle. Now it was kind of flipped, I guess, as I've gotten older. And I can kind of see the seams a little bit more of like, oh, here they just basically wound him up and said, okay, you do your stand-up bit for 15 minutes.
That's what was landing on me.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you can still do that, but this is where if a director is very capable,
right?
You shoot that very interestingly every time, and not just like plop the camera on him and it's like, okay, yeah, we'll be here, you do your thing. That's sort of how it feels like.
Yeah, it does.
But still a very good time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've not seen the Ben Stiller movie. Maybe he corrects all those things. And maybe you might like it. I got maligned. It looked kind of too serious to me when I saw the trailer, so I never ended up seeing it. But I don't know. Now I feel like maybe I should. I don't know.
I don't know. Probably not. And this is the other thing, talking of CGI and such, the little bits that Danny Kaye goes on, the stand-up comedy vaudevillian routine aside, but the way the dream sequences are shot and produced, I love those.
Those are very cool.
There's like a real tactile sense to them, but not sort of overly done. You can sort of feel that there's a kid-like imagination to how those things are put together. Versus, I remember the trailer, at least of the Ben Stiller one, of course, where all those sequences are heavy CGI.
Yes,
where he's in the clouds, and then of course, Kristen Wiig is waiting for him as sort of the straight person love interest, which. This movie falls in the weird Kristen Wiig filmography where she did a bunch of these like serious dramatic roles, which
didn't work.
That's the other reason why I just cannot watch this movie. I love her, but not in these kind of roles.
Well, that's an interesting point about how they handle the dream sequences in this film too, because there is realism to them, but they also feel like heightened. There's a sense of heightened reality, just like a real daydream would. Like
that's what exactly.
You don't shoot it as a serious, this guy's a captain on a ship in a storm and something's going to happen. It feels like like a dream.
Like thing.
If exactly, which I think is what works so well, because when you are daydreaming about that, wanting to be this grand adventure, even though you're not, you're just some bookish like guy who works at a pulp novel company. It is going to be heightened in your own, dreamlike state. And maybe that's why, again, I don't want to malign this Stiller film too much because I haven't seen it. But if if the daydreams were too realistic, it kind of takes away the point of kind of what's trying to go on there. But I'm glad you checked this out.
Yeah, me too. Actually, yeah, I had forgotten. I mean, I knew about the original, but I hadn't seen it. So yeah, this was very good.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.